Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. We are going to discuss a couple of fascinating plants today. As usual, these are both considered medicinal herbs and wild edibles. And so I'll be covering one out of my book, The Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast. As I always say, these grow everywhere because that's what weeds do. I just focus on, what I can actually go out to the yard or the woods or an old pasture or something and find. That's I feel more comfortable talking about the plants that I have more personal experience with. So, if you live in the desert or you live at the North Pole, maybe these things don't grow there, but actually probably about half of them do. You're still going to have dandelions. You're still going to have, what's another? Purslane. That's a desert-loving plant. Now, as far as the North Pole or South Pole, I cannot guarantee that, but I know burdock and everything grows in Alaska. So, just about anywhere. And both Americas and most of Europe and Asia, these plants grow. So we'll get into that. Of course, the other plant comes from my spring foraging cookbook. It is still, I think, as of today, what? Technically spring? But if you live in a cool climate like I do, still very much spring. In fact, I was walking my dog up a trail. I guess it was Friday, and I ran into some new neighbors. They bought a large property, um, well, up the mountain from me, top of the hill from me. It's a few acres apart and everything, and real nice people. Really like these new neighbors. He's a retired um, expert in fisheries for the state, and so we have a lot of in common as far as fishing and the interest there. And she's apparently very interested in wild herbs and edibles, and so just gave a little impromptu plant walk, and just literally within 5 feet of where I was standing, must have found a dozen wild edible plants and at least as many medicinal herbs. And it was just really nice. The dog kind of wandered around and did his thing, and I'm snacking on plantain and docks and dandelions, and got to tell him how to use buckeye for varicose veins, and identified spring doll's eyes as opposed to angelica, and showed him how to tell those plants apart and the medicinal uses of both those plants. But while angelica is relatively safe and really great herb, doll's eyes, I can't right now. No, right now I can't remember the Latin name. Really creepy looking plant. The stems are red usually, and the berries are white with little black spots, so it looks like really creepy doll's eyes from a horror movie or something. It does have some medicinal use, but it's very toxic and should only be used by an expert in that. And some mushrooms we identified, some rishis growing on the sides of trees, and it was really nice. So where I live, we're still doing our spring foraging, and yarrow, that was another one that was plentiful. Anyway, lots of plants. Oh, touch-me-nots. Yeah, they're really interested in the touch-me-nots because, as a fisherman, he gets poison ivy, but right now they're edible shoots, and they're just like asparagus. They're one of our great wild edible plants. You just take the tender shoots and saute them, and they're really good. But let's jump right in. Two plants that, like I said, are among my favorites. So we'll start with spring foraging, and this one may actually surprise you because it's often discussed as a medicinal herb. I've done a whole show on it as a medicinal herb. It's comfrey. And on comfrey, let's see if I can untwist my tongue. Unfortunately, comfrey, one of the most beloved medicinal plants of Europe and early America, which is also an edible plant, was once grown in the garden, it's become sort of a subject of controversy. I have discussed this before, but I need to give this little disclaimer and give my opinion on it. As always, you got to make your own decisions. Let me tell you, comfrey has been used as a food and medicine throughout Europe, evidence of its cultivation dating back thousands of years. I mean, literally, most people grew up foraging comfrey, growing it in the garden, eating it just as commonly as we would lettuce or cabbage today. For thousands of years. I mean, thousands of years. It's been documented in herbal medicine and just used as a common pot herb. It medicinally, it's really good. It promotes the growth of tissue. That's why it's known as knit bone. It's really good for healing wounds, healing broken bones. I've explained before how, when I really blew out my knee, I used a comfrey salve, and it healed very, very quickly. A friend of mine at the same time did the almost the exact same injury to his knee, whereas I stepped off the porch carrying about 400 pounds. He stepped down a ravine while out in the woods, and both of us just popped that knee, really blew it out. He went to the hospital. He had the full treatment. He had the surgery. He had the physical therapy. He had the brace, and it turns out he has the surgery, more physical therapy. And he's like, year and a half later, his knee's no better. And I said, well, try this comfrey salve. It healed mine up really within 6 months. Well, it healed it up within 6 weeks, really. But when you have a knee injury really bad like that, it's still going to feel a little tender and a little weak for several months, actually. But at least within 3-4 months. I was back out in the woods hiking. I was doing a little exercise, not lifting too heavy, not doing big heavy squats like I used to, but just, rehabbing the knee on my own. And he got the comfrey salve. I recommended one. He actually found one that was better. He found a German comfrey salve, which was really impressive. And he said, should I use it internally? I said, that's up to you. We'll talk about that in a minute. I think he just went topically, and within about 6 weeks, he was in the gym. So that's how powerful comfrey is. I've seen it close up wounds like you would not believe. In fact, the herbalist up in New York, Seven Song, he doesn't recommend the use of comfrey as a wash or a soak, basically strong tea, for puncture wounds, like a dog bite or if a nail gets stuck in you or something. He says because it will actually close the wound so quickly that infection can be trapped inside. I mean, when you have a deep puncture wound especially, you actually want it to bleed. You want it to help wash itself out. You'll use different antiseptics and sterilizing wound herbs, if you want to, or it can be Neosporin or whatever you're using from the drugstore. A lot of medical professionals say just now use sterilized water or slightly salinated sterilized water. They don't even want you to use alcohol or peroxide or anything like that anymore. I have no idea. It worked for my grandparents. They say it doesn't work now. I don't know. But my preference, if I was going to use any kind of antiseptic, is going to be Oregon grape or barberry root. That's plentiful. It's one of my favorite herbs. Really, really good. Really, really good. Antiseptic, antibacterial, but there are many, But anyway, if you put comfrey tea on there, if you put a compress of comfrey, it can actually just heal over on the top and stop bleeding. And that infection can still be down in the wound. And especially for like dog bites and such, that can be really bad because dogs' mouths are like sewers. I mean, honestly, I love my dog. He's my little buddy. He sits in my lap. He rides everywhere with me. But I don't get people to let their dog lick him in the face. And I've seen these awful commercials. Well, I won't say the name of the company, but I mean, they're letting them lick them in the mouth like they're kissing. And this is selling dog food and toys. And I'm thinking, this is getting pretty darn sick. And that's a real good way to get serious bacterial infection in your mouth and in your nose and in your eyes. And, that ain't going to happen for me. I mean, you can call me old-fashioned in that regard, but I do not regard I'm not a pet parent, okay? I'm a dog owner. And there is actually a difference. I mean, my little buddy may be my best friend. We actually argue and scrap. I mean, he will snap at me. He will growl at me and bark at me. And then the next minute he's wagging his tail and wanting to get in my lap. I don't regard him as a baby. And I think it's really sick for people to think that way. I let the dog be enough of a dog that he can still be independent and protect himself and, stand his ground against other dogs. When you start treating your animal like a baby and, taking out all their natural instincts, you can really put them in a dangerous position. I had a Weimaraner that, she was sort of timid by nature, but she had really been babied like that. And, she'd go out and bark at another dog, and if the dog growled back or whatever, she'd turn and run. Well, of course, that just triggered the chase instinct. The other dog would just tear her to shreds. You can't do that. It's just not right to do with an animal. You don't take the animal instinct out of an animal. You don't anthropomorphize an animal. Okay. Now, sometimes, like with chickens, okay, chickens are not native to our environment. They come from hot tropical regions. Yes, you have to make sure they can be warm enough in the winter. You have to protect them from predators because when you've taken these chickens and put them in a confined area, they have no protection from predators. So that's different, okay? Still, I would caution against anthropomorphizing a chicken, believing it has human emotions and bonding with it if you would like to eat it for lunch one day. That's I call it the Disneyfication of America. Movies like Bambi look, if you've ever been in the wild, deer are horrible mothers. There is essentially no family relationship between the buck and the fawn. Okay, I mean, he's done his job and he's gone. The fawns are raised by the mother until a certain, just a few months old, and then she starts kicking him in the face to get him away from her. Okay, that's how they wean their fawns. And if it's another doe, she can stay in the group of does. If it's a male, she'll just kick that little male deer until she drives him away, because that's how they reduce the problems of inbreeding within the herds. The bucks go off on their own. They may join like a small group of other bucks. The does go off on their own. And Bambi's mother would have kicked him in the face until... I mean, trust me, this is not the way. Trust me, he wouldn't have been sitting there worrying that a hunter had shot his mother. Wouldn't even know who his mother was in a couple of weeks. That's what animal nature is like, and it is quite different from people. Okay, and as far as Thumper, you want to know how awful rabbits can be? Even read Watership Down, which was anthropomorphized. I mean, they made these into like little people, right? Little horrible, monstrous, violent people. But no, seriously, rabbits can be quite aggressive and quite cruel to each other. It is not a Disney movie. Nature is not by no means Disney. It is bloody and it is cruel and it is animals are not people. Okay, people need to act like people, and people need to let animals act like animals, and the roles should never be confused. But let me get back to Comfrey. So, what is the controversy about Comfrey? Well, our government decided to give studies in which they gave rodents, as best I understand, the equivalent of about 50 gallons of strong comfrey tea a day. Yes, just like they did for sassafras. So no human being could obviously either make 50 gallons of comfrey tea a day or consume it. And Why they thought this was a good idea to do to lab rats or mice, whatever, I don't know. But not surprisingly, it gave them cancer. It gave them cancer because comfrey propagates tissue. And if you have a potential tumor growth, a potential cancer growth, it could actually stimulate the growth of that cancer if you had it in huge concentrated amounts. Frankly, the herbalist that I listen to, there's actually one called, used to be a guy around, he was really funny, he was called Skeeter Pilarski. He said that there's more carcinogen in a can of commercial beer than in about a gallon of comfrey tea. I believe that. Comfrey's been used as a tea for against arthritis to help that tissue. Anything along those lines by Europeans for centuries, for thousands of years. Comfrey's been eaten as a pot herb. Comfrey's been used both internally and externally for wounds and breaks and all that. So me, I think it's safe, but I don't have any family history of cancer. Okay, I would recommend you do your own research, make your own decisions. Now, here's the other thing. The government studies did not differentiate between Russian comfrey, which is hybridized, so it doesn't spread as much, it's not as weedy, and European comfrey. Since then, studies have shown it's the Russian comfrey they were using, and that was the one that's carcinogenic, and the traditional European comfrey is not. Well, again, I cannot tell you one way or the other. I can only tell you what my opinion is, and then tell you to do your own research. So, of all the wild edible plants, comfrey's probably the most like a garden pot herb, just like something you grow in your garden, and that's because it's been grown as both a wild edible and, I mean, both as a medicinal and a garden edible for thousands of years. And what's wild in our country got out of somebody's garden 100 or 200 years ago. My only caveat about it is it can be a little tough when it's mature. You know, that's it. So I like it better in the spring, but where I live, I can go straight into the summer with it. There are tons of recipes for comfrey. It can be used basically like any leafy green vegetable. Okay, not really strong in flavor, but it isn't like a delicate lettuce either. I like to combine it with beef and tomatoes in a long, slow braise, and that's really good. Comfrey will hold up to the cooking. It's not going to get mushy, right? I don't know what you would call the dish. Coming from my family's about half French, so coming from a French cooking tradition, I would call it maybe a ragu of beef and vegetables. It's just cooked down into something that's like a thick, rustic, kind of a stew, nice sauce. You could serve it over pasta or dip some bread in it or make a bread bowl. I love bread bowls. About anything thick enough to put in a bread bowl and not, seep through. Really love that. Basically, I consider such a preparation as just a really cooked down pot roast made with tomatoes instead of gravy. That's what I'm going to call it, right? So let's get a roast, maybe a chuck roast of beef or top sirloin. I would obviously prefer game, deer, anything like a deer roast. Shoot, I'd do a rabbit without a doubt. You're going to have different flavor. Yeah, I prefer red meat, but rabbit's also very good. It's just like chicken, so don't ever turn up your nose at that. I'd estimate you want maybe 3 pounds, maybe 3 pounds of meat. Depends on how many you're serving, though. I think a pound per person when it comes to a roast, because you're going to eat it for a couple of days. It's not going to be eaten in one serving. This one of those things is going to get better every day as it's reheated. So I like to go with like maybe a pound or even a pound and a half per person, because we might want to eat on it for 3 or 4 days. When I make something like this for myself, that's all I eat for a week because I love pot roasts and ragus and stews and things that just get better and richer, every day as they kind of are brought back up to a simmer. But, adjust to your taste. So let's say to about 3 pounds of meat. Let's go with about a pound of comfrey. Okay. I usually don't wash wild greens, but you can if you want. Trim them up. Trim off any bad spots. Just roughly chop them. Maybe 2 quarts of canned or stewed tomatoes, or if you have fresh tomatoes, you just want to Just drop them quickly in boiling water, pull the peels off, and crush them by hand. Or you can peel them with a vegetable peeler. If I use a vegetable peeler, the OXO style good grips, they used to advertise on PBS all the time. Those are great. I love the OXO style vegetable peeler. And if I'm just going to peel one tomato for myself, I'll absolutely use a vegetable peeler. Just save the skins and throw them in the stock pot. If I'm doing, yeah, I mean, even three tomatoes, I'd do with a vegetable peeler. If I'm doing more like making up a bunch of sauce, putting up a bunch to freeze. Yeah, they're going to go in boiling water, just be peeled by hand. That's it. No big deal. So, at least for me, one green pepper. You could use a bell pepper, but for me, I'd use a couple poblanos. I love the flavor of poblano. I just think it can have a little heat. It's a little more, well, it's a little more intense in flavor, and almost as sweet as a bell pepper, but not quite. So to me, it's more for my taste, but yeah, I throw in jalapenos, jalapenos, serranos. I like a little heat, but if it poblano's my go-to pepper. Let's just put it that way. Um, Maybe three medium yellow onions or any wild onions you like. So yeah, we're gonna go with a lot of onion in this, and ditto on the garlic. If you don't like garlic, I'd still go with at least three cloves. I might use half the head or even the whole head of garlic. I like garlic. Some summer squash would be really good, or zucchini. So if it's, I grow always the yellow crookneck squash. I like patty pan, but this is one you could definitely do with zucchini, or as we discussed before, you could do eggplant. Now, always with eggplant, you want to peel it when you're doing something like this, like a soup, a stew, a saute of eggplant. Peel it, cube it, okay, then put it in a colander. If you've got a colander, salad spinner, anything, salt it, turn it over, salt it on the other side, let it just sit and drain out some of that bitter, dark water, and you're going to get such a better texture and flavor from your eggplant. Do remember, though, you have salted this eggplant, so you need to adjust when you're adding salt to the pot. Salt by taste, don't salt by assumption, right? So when that eggplant has drained, you could give it a quick saute and then throw it in the pot, or you could just throw it straight in the pot. It's because it's going to have a more meaty-like texture. It's not going to get soggy. But I would let it cook in there a little bit before I added salt, just so some salt's going to come out of that eggplant. Mushrooms, absolutely. Now, I put optional beside mushrooms. I don't think they're optional, actually, in this dish. I honestly don't. If I didn't have wild mushrooms, which I'm absolutely surrounded with in the mountains, I'd just run to the store and get some white button mushrooms. Maybe, shiitakes, whatever I can get. If I had, the old canned mushrooms, Del Monte and different companies with canned mushrooms, I'd throw those in there. I mean, any kind of mushroom I can get. Even if it was dried mushrooms, reconstitute them in some hot water, chop them up, throw them in. Um, and any herbs you like. Oregano, basil, thyme, mint, very nice. Rosemary, and definitely some red wine. Okay, this is a dish that does need the red wine. If you're opposed to drinking alcohol, I guess what I would say is add some stock, be probably beef or chicken stock, and you're going to want a little acidity, so maybe a dash of vinegar. It can be a whole lot better with red wine, a whole lot better. Brown the meat in the pot with a little olive oil or any fat you like. Wouldn't use butter on this because the butter can burn, but I'm talking, whatever. Lard would be just fine, or if there's some cooking oil you like more than olive oil, use it. Olive oil and butter are basically the two fats I use, along with, well, beef tallow or suet. That's a definite, that would be really good in there. And lard, you can't go wrong with bacon fat or lard. Anyway, so brown your meat really well. Brown it on all sides, okay? Take it out for a minute. Add a little, just put it on a plate, okay? Save the juices. Some of the juices will start to run out. That's going to go back in the pot. So anyway, just sit it to the side after browning. Add some more fat. Toss in the raw veggies and your salted eggplant if you're using that. Definitely your mushrooms. Salt and pepper to taste. Brown those mushrooms real well. Put the meat in the pot. Add the tomatoes and herbs. Slowly simmer. I would add the wine as the liquid for the tomatoes starts to evaporate. So I'm not adding like more water or anything, Add some stock and some wine would be perfect. And the dish is done when the meat falls apart. If you like, you can actually take a couple forks and start kind of shredding that meat if you're going to serve it on pasta. That's exactly what I would do. But anyway, otherwise I would just chunk it, put it on a bowl, and the nice sauce over it, a little hearty baked bread, and another glass of wine. And man, I mean, I honestly don't think there are many more meals better than that, honestly. So that covers our wild edible, and we also got to talk about some medicinal uses of comfrey. So let's get into another one that, as you know, if you've listened to the show before, one of my absolute favorite wild edibles. Also one of my absolute favorite medicinals. Another matter of controversy. It is pokeweed, Phytolacca americana, a plant native to the Americas, I should say, widely used by Native Americans. Well, we'll get into it a little bit, but the various tribes really introduced poke to the European settlers, both as food and medicine. Another one that's controversial. Poke does have a toxicity. We've discussed this before. The root is the strongest. I have read, I think Michael Moore said as little as a half ounce of the root tincture could be fatal. Other sources say an ounce of the tincture could be fatal. Frankly, an ounce would be a very large amount, and frankly, a half ounce would be fairly large as well. It's usually something given in very small amounts when indicated. The berries are the next most toxic, but again, I wouldn't freak out about them. In fact, I think it was the Cherokee that introduced the process of making wine from the berries and then taking a sip or a teaspoonful of it each day for arthritis. And that was a very popular use for poke in America well until about 1900, early 1900s, probably even 1920s. The stalk is inedible, not really usable, and it's deeply purple. Now, when the plant first comes up in the spring, it has nice tender leaves that are somewhere in taste between spinach and sweet garden peas. And as long as they have no purple from the stem, the stalk to the stem, going up into the leaf, they're generally considered to be safe. In fact, the shoots, the young spring shoots of the plant and the leaves were one of the most popular foods in America. There were actually canning industries that sold poke shoots and poke leaves as a cooked green through grocery stores throughout America until probably I mean, they would still be in the stores in the 50s. I mean, people really didn't get a bad idea about poke until, I'm going to say, the 70s, 60s, 70s. And in my opinion, that's because we had that whole Industrial Revolution. We had the World Wars and the rationing, and then we had the big boom of the canned foods and the processed foods, and people stopped learning from their grandparents how to forage and how to cook wild foods. And people began to become afraid of wild foods. And, you know, poke is a plant that people became afraid of because it does have a mild toxicity. Probably every year, a kid goes and eats the berries. Basically just throws them up. Okay? That's the response. When you've had too much poke, you throw it up. Parent freaks out, calls poison control. It might make the headlines. There's a warning of, you know, don't let your kids eat poke. That's how these things get kind of blown out of proportion. But most often, poison control will say, don't worry, the kid's going to throw up. Okay? Yeah, I actually have not been able to find a documented case in which eating poke berries caused death. Now, there may be one. I may just not have run across it yet, but that's because you throw it up. Now, a tincture, being alcohol, is going to be absorbed into the bloodstream really before you have a chance to throw it up. That's why I would be cautioned against using the root tincture. That said, I use the root. Just as is. When I was getting over COVID, the dead virus and all, I needed a lymph cleanser. Okay, I could feel I was just really not getting over this cold and still feeling lousy, even though I knew the virus had run its course. I went outside. I dug up a poke root. I took a bite out of it. Within 30 minutes to an hour, I started sweating. It was like that kind of like when you break a fever. In fact, it does help break a fever, and I was running a low-grade fever. It's like that flop sweat. You know, you're just suddenly soaked in sweat. And I felt tremendously better afterwards. I did it again the next day. I did it again the next day, and then I was okay. I didn't need to do it anymore. Every book you read will tell you that would kill you. I see. I've been eating poke all my life. I think I may have developed a tolerance to it. All I'm saying is I would not overblow the toxicity of poke Just is an herb you should use with respect and with experience. Now, I would not recommend you go take a bite of the root. If you're even considering it, I'd say just take a tiny little scraping of the root, like take your pocket knife and take off a little tiny piece of it and see how you react. But I'm not going to recommend that at all. Where I really think people overblow the risk is with the greens. Now, of all the foraging books, except for maybe Yule Gibbons actually, I think he would just boil the poke leaves and then fry them in bacon fat. If I remember correctly, and I may be wrong about that, but in Stalking the Wild Asparagus, I believe that's the way he said to do it. That's really the way I do it, always have, and that's probably why. But well, that's the Appalachian tradition too. You just kind of boil the leaves once and fry them up in some pork fat. Put some vinegar on there and enjoy them. But every modern book says boil in either 2 or 3 changes of water and then cook in pork fat. And as far as I'm concerned, by the time you've done 3 changes of water, you may as well be eating newspaper. The flavor's gone, the nutrition's gone, it just went down the drain for the most part. Okay? But if that's what the experts say, that's what I'm going to tell you. And that's what the experts say. I actually would just go pick the raw leaves and eat them. Not in a large amount, but I'll grab 2 or 3 and eat them, and it's never made me sick at all. Okay. A friend of mine mistook the word salat, S-A-L-A-T, which is an Old English word for pot herb, for salad, S-A-L-A-D, which we generally think of as fresh, green, raw vegetables now. And they do derive from the same root word. It's actually salt. They would salt their greens. And whether you had a cooked or raw, salted greens were once, I think, may even come from, is it Old English? Or yeah, I think it is Old English. Like ancient Anglo-Saxon, actually. May have even been Norman, come to think of it. It doesn't matter. I'm sure you're not interested in the etymology of salad. If you are salad, you can check it out. Whereas in the Greek and Roman tradition, it would have been called mesculin, a mix of greens, and that's, but anyway. Anyway, she mistook salad for salad and ate a large bowl of raw poke leaves. Started feeling sick, called poison control, and they said, don't worry, it's going to clear your system within a couple of hours. And she had a very, very rough night in the bathroom. So I do think it is wise to cook your poke greens. When using it as any way medicinally, use caution and care. But I also don't think it's an herb you need to be afraid of. Now let's look at probably one of the first entries in a British herbal for poke was Miss Grieve, 1930s. Because it is an American herb. She said, this is regarded as one of the most important of indigenous American plants and one of the most striking in appearance. I think it's a pretty plant. I don't know why people think it was a weed. I mean, purple stems, bright purple berries, big green leaves. The perennial root is large and fleshy. The stem is hollow, and the leaves alternate, and they are ovate lanceolate. Those are botanical terms, which means they're just kind of like pointy like the ends of a lance. Okay, that's lanceolate, and ovate meaning they're oval, rounded up to that point. They're going to be wider at the base than they are at the top. That's lanceolate, but they're going to be round throughout. Rounded, oval, we'll call it ovate. And the flowers have a white calyx with no corolla. The fruit is a deep purple berry covering the stem in clusters, and she says resembling blackberries. They're actually not. They don't look anything like blackberries, but the juice does. And that juice was used as a dye, very valuable dye by both Native Americans and early Americans, and as a substitute for ink as well. I think it's a valuable plant to have around. The young shoots make a good substitute for asparagus, and poultry eat the berries. That's right, birds can eat the berries with no problem. But she said that if your poultry ate a large quantity of the berries, like if you try to use as a feed, it could cause it to be have an unpleasant flavor, but also could cause the meat to become purgative with eating. In other words, it could make you throw up if you ate the chickens that have been eating enough of the berries. So it's fine to let them eat a few, but don't try to substitute for chicken feed, basically. In Portugal, the juice of the berries is used to color port wines. Isn't that interesting? That's how, not to freak out about the berries they are. But she says it was discontinued because it spoiled the taste. It would make the port bitter. I can see that, absolutely. The stain of the juice is a beautiful purple and used to make a dye. Well, she said it would be useful to make a dye if a way of fixing it were found. Yeah, I guess it's true. You do have to use a fixative to make it hold its color. A decoction of the roots has been used for drenching cattle. I guess that helps probably with botfly, actually, try to keep the bad parasitic bugs off of them. Various uses we don't use anymore, like using it as an adulterative to belladonna. We don't really use belladonna so much in herbal medicine anymore. It is a slow emetic and purgative, which means it will make you throw up and have diarrhea in large amounts. With narcotic properties, it's not so much like drug-like, but it just means it slows respiration and heart rate. It's used as an alternative in chronic rheumatism and granular conjunctivitis, as an ointment, various skin diseases. I think, well, I'm not even going to try to define some of these because she's using old terms, but various skin diseases. And she says at first it caused a smarting and heat, and then it becomes soothing. The slowness of the action of the narcotic effect that accompanies it renders its use as an emetic inadvisable. In other words, before you throw up, you could actually kind of slow your heart rate down a little too much. So not a substitute for Ipecac, in other words. It is used as a cathartic in paralysis of the bowels. Headaches from many sources are benefited by it, and both a lotion and tincture are used in leukorrhea. As a poultice, it causes rapid suppuration of felons. Those are sores on the fingers. The extract is said to have been used in chronic rheumatism and hemorrhoids. Authors differ as its value to cancer. Yes, it was once a folk cancer remedy. It's the lymph purging, the lymphatic effect. I'm not going to recommend any cancer remedy. I never do. You have to do your own research. She said, infused in spirits, the fruit is used in chronic rheumatism, being regarded as an equal to I can't pronounce that. Guacum. Anyway, it is doubtful if the roots would cure syphilis without the help of mercury. And of course, we don't use mercury in medicine anymore. Quite dangerous, so let's not even worry about that. Getting into American use, this is the first herbal I've been able to find actually written in America, and it was written by colonists who began to see the usefulness of Native American herbs combined with British and European herbalism, and that, of course, fostered the eclectic school of medicine, which we'll get into in a moment. But the first was Towards an American Materia Medica, which was written somewhere around 1730 or so, I think, maybe 1700. The Phytolacca, well known by the name poke, is one of the most common North American plants. It is certainly a plant of great activity, though the young shoots, when boiled, may be eaten with impunity and are justly deemed a great delicacy. See, I mean, our ancestors really thought this was a great food plant, and it's really, we've become pretty dumb to forget that, just like dandelion, you know. But by many, they are preferred to the finest asparagus. Some of the medicinal powers of this plant have been long known. The ripe berries and fruit infused in brandy or wine, especially in the former, are a popular remedy for rheumatism in many parts of the United States. The tincture of poke is certainly a valuable medicine in cases of chronic rheumatism and other similar affectations. Like the volatile tincture of okay, you know what? I am just going to look up the Latin name, and I'm going to give you the common because I cannot pronounce Guiacum. All right, so there's this. Yes, I double checked. It is a family of about 20 plants, most of which are tropical. They're in the caltrop family, and the one we have here is Lingam vitae. Guaiacium. It was coming from Guam, and that may have something to do with the name. Oh, like the tincture of the gum of Guaiacium, it has sometimes done injury, as might indeed be expected from an active medicine in the hands of injudicious or the ignorant. It may, I believe, be safely exhibited in most cases of rheumatism, in which the Guaiacium, that I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, in rheumatic affections which frequently succeed to the venereal disease. So that's, as we discussed earlier, it seems to be a more valuable medicine than Guaiacium, and it may be advantageously employed, especially with calomel or other preparations of mercury. So yes, that is what we've just discussed. I have employed the ripe juice of the berries in the state of an extract in some cases of scrofula. The juice in some state has, I have informed, been used advantageously in cases of cancerous ulcers. So ulcerated sores is what we're talking. More like cankers, okay? So that would be topically. These ulcers were dressed with the extract and spread upon linen and upon the leaf of the plant. The juice of the leaves applied in the same manner is said to have been found more efficacious. I am inclined to repose some credit in the testimonies I have collected concerning the utility of the extract of poke in cases mentioned. Speaking of the eclectics, I have a copy of the American Eclectic Materia Medica, which is a really fascinating book. This is early America as well. Specific indications. This is for the tincture of the poke root, which, I'm not recommending. I think you can be a little safer with the berries or, if used when the mucous membranes are pale and the epithelium gives way, showing vesicles, erosions, and ulcerations. And in fact, this is actually the use he was just saying for the juice of the leaves, which I don't think is very dangerous at all. Deposits in and upon the mucous epithelium of an ashen gray color, enlargement of lymphatic glands, especially with pallor, mammary pain or inflammation, irritation of the salivatory glands or of the testes. The phytolacca is emetic, that means it makes you throw up. Cathartic, another way for saying it can give you diarrhea. Alterative, which means it essentially can gradually bring you back to health. And discutient. And discutient means it can get rid of what they call morbid matter. It's dispersing. That's actually kind of how we're using it as a lymphatic. So it acts as an emetocathartic. It exhibits some narcotic powers such as impaired vision, vertigo, and drowsiness. In overdoses, it is said to cause excessive vomiting and purging, with great prostration and occasional convulsions. Really, you're going to throw up. It's going to give you diarrhea. It's going to knock you out like crazy if you had too much of it. If you're pulverizing the dry root, apparently it could cause a headache and prostration, basically dizziness, makes you fall down. As an alternative in chronic rheumatism and in syphilis, but few agents are known to the profession which are searching. They were saying it hadn't been researched enough at that point to really recommend it for syphilis anyway, and hopefully you'll never need it for that. They talk about using it as a poultice. They said it was good for diphtheria. It said hundreds of cases have been treated with these remedies alone, with a success almost marvelous. And of course, the treatment must commence early. Wow. Prominent remedy in stomatitis, infantile sore mouth or sore mouths of adults. I think I'd be very careful with children. Remedy for mammary inflammation. They said this use of phytolacca should be widely known, as it will prevent the suffering that attends in the usual course of mammary inflammation, terminating its suppuration. Uses an application to inflame breast. Nothing is better than the powdered root wetted with warm water or the tincture with warm water. So I guess that's why you'd use the powdered root. Was unaware of that. Also good for sore nipples. Remedy for, they were using it for mumps. They got a lot of uses for it, in all honesty, and they're combining it with some really dangerous plants like aconite and gelsemium and belladonna. I'm not going to get into this. They combine it with cannabis for, a lot of dangerous things. Okay, so we'll get into a little bit more modern use of it. 1870 or so, resources of the southern fields and forests. They said mixed with brandy, it is extolled as a cure for rheumatism, easing the pain and producing discharge of the cutaneous and urinary secretions. Ounce of the dried root infused in a pint of wine is said to act kindly as an emetic, so he actually liked it used that way for causing you to throw up. I think they're probably safer ones to use than that. Uh, Bigelow was the pharmacist that found it was resembled ipecac when used in that way. The tincture of the ripe berry seems to have acquired a well-found reputation as a remedy in chronic syphilitic rheumatism and for allaying the pains. The decoction has been used in scrofula also, but don't try to distill it. They said it could be very, very poisonous if done that way. Now we get into a lot of doctors' anecdotes about using it for syphilis and arthritis. They do warn in overdoses its effects are quite dangerous. And got a lot of information. Well, syphilis was very common in America around the time of the Civil War. It's kind of went with the. You're going to find that in anywhere you're having a war. I'll just put it that way. You can use your imagination. So we'll skip through a lot of this. I don't think we need to go through all these different doctors' statements about how they used it for syphilis. I think we've already gotten the idea. And he talks about how it could be used as a dye and everything. By 1898, King's Medical Dispensatory gives a very long description of it. Actions, medical uses, and dosages. Phytolacca acts upon the skin, the glandular structures, especially those of the throat, the sexual system, very markedly upon the mammary glands. It further acts upon fibrous and serous tissue and the mucous membranes of digestive and urinary tracts. The drug is principally eliminated by the kidneys. Applied to the skin, either in the form of a juice or strong decoction or poultice of the root, it can produce a pustular eruption. The powdered root, when inhaled, is very irritating to the respiratory passage. Phytolacca slows the heart's action, reduces the force of the pulse, and lessens the respiratory movements. It is a paralyzer of the spinal cord, acting principally on the medulla. In poisoning by this agent, convulsions may ensue. Upon the gastrointestinal tract, it acts as a emetic and drastic cathartic, producing nausea, which comes on slowly. Then it continues to act on the bowels, the purging being prolonged for a considerable length of time. For that reason, it was seldom used for that purpose, and I think that's probably very wise. Therapeutic action, emetic cathartic narcotic alternative. In certain cases of the system, which might come under the head of trichosia, it proves a valuable alternative. Scrofulous, syphilitic, and rheumatic conditions are invariably benefited by it. It is suited to chronic rheumatism and syphilitic and rheumatic joint affections. As an anti-rheumatic, quite large doses are necessary. Oh, and that was used as a tincture of the berries, so we don't need to get into too much more there. They said it was an important drug at the time. It was used actually by pharmacists and doctors in the dermatological practice. It destroys the itch insect, which was the cause of scabies. So that scabies is caused by a little parasitic insect, and it would destroy them. So that was when they were talking, even going back when they said it was used as a wash for cows and such. So that's really good. They said it was good for chronic eczema, psoriasis, varicose, and ulcers of the legs. Let's see. Used in diseases of the mouth and throat. It is highly esteemed. Used in acute chronic mucus infections such as laryngitis, influenza, catarrh. Used in diseases of the glandular system. They said phytolacca was one of our best drugs. And better than iris, which had been used previous to that. Iris can be very toxic. It was used for very, very many things. I can't even get into all of them. Let me see if I can. I'll try to get a little Native American use, and then we'll try to get to modern use and try to wrap this up here. Herbal remedies of the Lumbee tells us that poke greens were used similar in their tribe as I use them, but also used as a treatment for boils. And they said that open wounds were treated with the juice of the root being rubbed on the skin or the fresh root being applied to afflictions. The root was prepared to treat cramps or muscle spasms in both men and women. The roots and berries were used by the Lumbee as a poultice for rheumatism, nervous fevers, and swellings. To deworm chickens, the root was covered in water and placed in the feed bowl. The Waccamaw Siouan tribe used roasted and split poke root to treat sore feet. Many Lumbee ate large poke leaves to treat worms, so the mature leaves raw. I can kind of see that. Um, the ones you're not supposed to eat as a wild edible, in other words. Cold tea of powdered root was fashioned to treat kidney troubles. Jethro Kloss in the mid 1900s said the leaves are excellent as greens for the dinner table, especially in early spring. He was a big fan of the shoots. He said the poke shoot should be boiled before eating and the water drained off and discarded. Boil again in fresh water and drain the water again. So he did recommend 2 changes of water for the shoots. Does not mention it at all for the spring leaves. He says very good for hard liver, biliousness, inflammation of the kidneys, enlarged lymphatic glands, effective in goiter, taken internally or applied as a poultice or liniment. Excellent in skin diseases, scrofula, eczema. If a tea is made of the root and applied to the skin where the itching is, poke root makes a good poultice for caked breasts. May add in advanced cancer of the breast as a poultice. I'm not going to recommend that. Probably doesn't work. Care should be taken in using the roots that are insufficiently cooked or fresh. And yes, that is true. The roots are the most toxic. And he says the seeds are poisonous and should never be eaten. That's interesting. So, modern use. Plants for a future. Pokeweed has a long history of medicinal use, being employed traditionally in the treatment of diseases related to a compromised immune system. The plant has an interesting chemistry and, as of 1995, was being investigated as a potential anti-AIDS drug. It contains potent anti-inflammatory agents, antiviral proteins, and substances that affect cell division. These compounds are toxic to many disease-causing organisms, including the water snail that causes schistosomiasis, another one I have trouble with. All parts of the plant are toxic and excess causing diarrhea and vomiting. This remedy should not be prescribed to pregnant women. Absolutely not. The root is alterative, anodyne, anti-inflammatory, cathartic, expectorant, hypnotic, narcotic, and purgative. The dried root is used as an anodyne and anti-inflammatory. The root is taken internally in the treatment of autoimmune diseases, especially rheumatoid arthritis, tonsillitis, mumps, glandular fever, and other complaints involving swollen glands, chronic catarrh, bronchitis, etc. The fresh root is used as a poultice on bruises, rheumatic pains, etc., whilst a wash was made from the roots applied to swelling and sprains. The root is best harvested in the autumn and can be dried for later use. That's how I use it, except in that emergency case that I mentioned to you. The fruit has a similar but mild action to the fruits. The juice is used in the treatment of cancer, hemorrhoids, and tremors. A poultice made from it is applied to sore breasts. A tea made from the fruit is used in the treatment of rheumatism, dysentery, etc. The plant has an unusually high potassium content, and the ashes contain over 45% caustic potash, and they have been used as a salve for ulcers and cancerous growths. The leaves are cathartic, emetic, and expectorant. A homeopathic remedy is made from the fresh root. Its main action is on the throat, breast, muscular tissue, and joints. Known hazards. The leaves are poisonous. They are said to be eaten when young. They are said to be safe when eaten when young. Toxins develop as the plant grows older. Another report says the seeds and roots are poisonous. The plant sap can cause dermatitis in sensitive people. The plant contains substances that cause cell division and can damage chromosomes. These substances can be absorbed through abrasions of the skin, potentially causing serious blood aberrations, and is strongly recommended that people wear gloves when handling the plant. That's just, if you're cutting the stalks and the sap gets on an open wound. That's what we're talking about here, so don't freak out. The Cloverleaf Farms Herbal Encyclopedia gives a little more history of the plant. I think we've covered the history very well. They say anti-rheumatic, anti-arthritic, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, immune stimulating, lymphatic decongestant. They give the standard warnings and standard uses. Essentially, let's see if they say anything new. We've talked about poultice and ointments. We talked about homeopathic remedies. Said in Vermont, the berries infused in wine were still considered a valuable remedy for rheumatism. And in Canada, it has been used successfully to treat psoriasis. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Nice long entry on poke. And I've covered it in another show where we had even different sources and more information, believe it or not. It's a really good herb, in my opinion. It is one of my favorite wild edibles. It is a pot herb I look forward to every year, and I think it's so abundant. It is so abundant. I mean, it was a valuable source for food for Native Americans, early Americans, and popular well into the early 1900s. Like, one of the writers said, it was considered to be superior to the finest asparagus, an absolute delicacy. So it's one you should learn about. You make your own decision if you think either comfrey or poke or something you want to incorporate in your diet or use medicinally. I'm not going to tell you one way or the other. Listen to the disclaimer that runs at the end of the show. I'm not a doctor and I don't give medical advice. I can tell you that I like these plants. They're actually two of my favorites, and I look forward to foraging and harvesting every year. Honestly, I mean, it's just really one of my absolute favorites. I eat a little raw, even though you're not supposed to, and I eat plenty of it cooked. So, y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.